Hello everybody, and welcome to another EVE Frontier live stream. I am CCP Jötunn, and I was joined a moment ago by CCP Cat, who does not seem to understand that I've tried to lure her up here with treats. It's okay, it's fine. I'm not going crazy here on a holiday by myself, alone in my home. I'm in fact here with all of you at on this live stream here. It's a beautiful Tuesday, a lovely day in Reykjavik. Ah, there she is, of course, easily coerced with food. But yes, this is actually a pre-recorded stream, not right now, this is live, but we are going to be seeing a pre-recorded stream we did yesterday with CCP Maximum Cats talking about the visual target of EVE Frontier, and I'm so excited to be able to get this, to show this with you. This is a kind of a big one. This has been kind of a long time coming for us. I need to put that camera box back up because it does not quite mesh with the background. We'll figure that out later. But this is a huge stream. There's a ton of really cool stuff I've never seen myself before in this stream, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll be back at the end to talk about a couple more administrative things before we get out of here. But for the next hour and 40 minutes or so, I will go ahead and pass it over to myself from the past and CCP Maximum Cats. Take it away, me from 24 hours ago. All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is another EVE Frontier live stream that we are doing, but it's not live. This is a recorded live stream. This is a recorded stream that we've done as you're watching this about 24 hours ago, because hopefully all of us are in bed right now. It is a holiday in Iceland, probably a holiday in wherever you're at as well. I hope, I pray. But joining us today, how exciting is this? We have not had this person on in a while. This is our beloved game director, savant, if you will. Not game director, game design director. No, not game design, creative director. Got it in three. Third time's the charm. Our creative director, CCP Maximum Cats. Maximum Cats, hello and welcome back to the stream. How are you?
Hello. Very good.
Good.
Glad to be here.
I'm glad to hear that. We have not had you on in a minute. The stress of not having your presence here, it just kills me. It's the worst. This is a stream so you and I have talked about this for the last couple of weeks, because this is one that we knew we were going to do at some point, right? Because this is one of the things that gets brought up a lot, especially in terms of like when you're talking about space games in general, right? Space games have to hit a certain aesthetic, right? People are looking for a certain vibe visually. And EVE has done a great job at this. While people will complain that the standard interface of EVE is very much not showcasing the quality of the work at hand because of how pulled back most of the scenes are and how little you actually see of like the ships, and people spend all this money and stuff on skins, but you don't actually see the skins because you're whatever. You cannot deny the work that team has done to meet an aesthetic. And it's incredible work. I mean, I don't think anybody is ever going to deny the effort that they have put into capturing that vibe, right? And Frontier is no different. I mean, you are in charge of the creative teams. Obviously, you guys have a whole plan, a whole strategy, I imagine, for how a vision for how you imagine the Frontier is going to look. So I guess before we get started, because this is, I guess I led with this to say, the intention of us doing the stream now is that we want to showcase some ideas and where we are going. This is not, like I said, I say this all the time, everything you're seeing is alpha content. A lot of it's a work in progress. Don't take anything you see here with a grain of salt. Or take everything you see here with a grain of salt. Don't take everything for gospel. It's not there yet. But we do want to showcase direction because we're already seeing a lot of direction, right? We're seeing a lot of, you look at the inside of the NPC stations in game currently, and you see these soaring monoliths, these ancient structures. They don't have all of there's not the same sense of like activity of civilization almost. It's very distinct from EVE and very distinct from a lot of other games that take place in space. I feel like, and I don't want to talk forever while you sit here and just yes, of course. But there is this sense that a lot of games in this genre have these sweeping empires, these soaring civilizations. This actually kind of puts me more in the mind of like Metroid Prime, right? And the vibes you get from what is effectively like an abandoned world that used to have high civilization there but doesn't anymore. What kind of inspirations do you guys look for when you're talking about the visual aesthetic of a game like Frontier?
We often do, and then as you alluded at, we often do find ourselves looking at things that are lying outside of confines of what is the norm of science fiction. Sometimes lately we're describing the general vibe of the experience as kind of it's Conan the Barbarian in space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more mythical. It's more like we also describe it as the world of ancient future.
Sure.
Where more time has passed since humanity has collapsed than, in real life way more time than in real life between ancient Rome and present day.
Right.
So there are many more things that are forgotten that we have ever known. And at the same time, also trying to kind of look past the surface veneer of the sci-fi genre as a reinterpretation of reality into the actual reality. And if we look at space, out there, even as much as we understand it now, and our understanding of it is evolving in real time lately. Like we're starting to realize that, that a lot of things in physics kind of just don't really add up now that we have these, much longer range capabilities for, astronomy. So we look at that world and we see something that is like, it's insane in an existential way. It's like the scales of everything and just the nature of things you can't even call them, unfriendly to human life or inhospitable. They're on a completely different scale. Like they can't know what life even is.
Right.
So we are trying to capture a lot of that. So, the things that are underlying the sci-fi as genre and that triggered that genre into existence to begin with, but without so much looking into, these regurgitated surface level interpretations of it that we normally see.
There's this line in one of the Warhammer books where it talks about the Temple of Correction, right, which is where the Rabute Gilliman, one of the Primarchs, is resting in his stasis pod. And they say that the Temple of Correction, to build it, they use enough marble that you could use to build a mountain and enough plasticine to, build an entire fleet of warships. And the scale, just to, all of this to house, one guy sitting in a chair. And so in my mind, the scale of these things often, I feel like, because we are the creatures of our own understanding, right? We are limited by our own experiences. We don't have we don't have the reference, right, to make these comparisons for ourselves. So saying how big is a thing, what does it look like, how ancient is it, all of these are just kind of things that we can say, but putting it in practice is a whole different matter. And that is the challenge that you guys have in front of you, taking these ideas of ancient and huge and abandoned on all these different ideas and turning them into something tangible, which is pretty cool. So
yes.
You have a presentation, and I'm so excited to see it. As usual. But your presentations are very good. I've never complained about any of your presentations. Some of these presentations, a little sus. I've seen the ones that Overload brings in, a little suspect. But we're going to go ahead and go over to this screen. And so you're going to show us some stuff. I'm going to say this one more time. Everybody, grain of salt. But also, I think there's probably some stuff in here that is getting closer to what you have in mind for what we want to be looking at. So, which is great. And I mean, and this is not stuff that you're necessarily going to see tomorrow or next month or whenever, but it is coming. So, Mr. Cats, Mr. Maximum Cats, please take it away. What have you got?
So, I'm planning to talk a little bit about kind of the overall progress on our visuals, not even so much on the on the art style of it or the creative intent behind it. We had a stream on this, and maybe there will be time for a stream that is more focused on art direction and concept art and what we're trying to do. This one is a little bit more about how we're trying to do it. It's the graphics, it's how all of this art stuff is coming to life.
Sure.
Because we have some really cool progress there lately, which I think would be really cool to show, because a lot of it, as you also alluded to a little bit, is not that far off on the horizon. So it's showing things that are coming pretty soon. It may be in better form than what we're going to be soon. It's some of these are in months, some of these are maybe in years, who knows, but the stuff that we're showing here right now is stuff that we're definitely sure about, coming to life at some point. Not ideas land. So yeah, mostly focused on the graphics side of this stuff, but we're touch on the broader context a little bit too. So yeah, to touch on just the general intents still first, why do we need these particular capabilities? What do we use them? What do we use them for? What are we fleshing out? Is, if you might remember, we're building a this is going to be a mouthful, a moddable, massively multiplayer online space survival horror role-playing game.
Yes, pretty close. Pretty close. Right? Not too bad.
Yeah. It's I'm sorry for that. In more simple terms. No, it's really good. It's very good. In more simple terms, it's a not so much more simple, but it's a runtime programmable, decentralized single shard MMO. So we're really taking all of this modularity and modability and programmability into a new dimension. And it's still a part of the EVE universe, but it's a completely its own branch of it, with its own art and its own world building, its own lore, everything. Everything is bespoke. And we're using we are sharing our technology with EVE Online. We have this Carbon engine and tools that are coming with it. But we are updating a lot of the capabilities in order to realize this particular vision, because we realize that even to just, if we have to rebuild just EVE Online from scratch anew right now, we probably wouldn't be able to without updating some of the capabilities, or even kind of rediscovering some of the capabilities.
Sure.
And although we started with pretty much that, we started with not maybe trying to recreate EVE Online, but we started with a kind of a deep mod of EVE Online. It's just we took EVE at a certain snapshot of EVE, we forked it, and we started to add some experimental features. Because we're still in the scope of discovery. We're trying to understand if this project is even worth doing. Maybe there is a world where we can just take EVE and add blockchain to it, add new tick rate, which is another thing that we were experimented with, and just use it as a test bed for some things and call it a day. But then we quickly realized that these were just baby steps. There is much more potential in creating its own thing out of it. But that still allowed us to be very pragmatic about the development process, where we can stand on the shoulders of the giants and not do things which we know we can do in the future, but we can also use off-the-shelf solutions from what EVE has done. So starting small, being very scrappy about using our existing technology, because shipping even just one game makes you learn a lot about being pragmatic. It's really difficult to ship a game, especially something of this scale.
Was there a moment in this early process where you realized, was it a gradual realization that what you were building was not just a mod of EVE, or just like a fork of EVE that you would then do some testing on and then call it good, or was it just like a flash in the pan? There was like a moment where you're like, oh, this is something completely different than what we were expecting. And was that
It was relatively gradual, but then there was also a particular playtest where a lot of the feedback that we had from a very, very close-knit group of testers at that point was that, somewhat surprisingly, they were more eager about it stepping further away from EVE on all fronts, even in terms of the lore, the art assets, everything. And so we looked at that and went, it's more interesting for us too to create an entirely new thing. So maybe there is something, and so these intents kind of coalesce together into into what we're trying to do now.
I mentioned it a couple times, I think, just to people who've asked about it, and just the change that the project has gone, just in the time since I've been here, or the time since I first found out about it. I mean, the first playtest I ever saw, like pictures or video of, still had a ton of early assets. A lot of them were just kind of, flipped over models of Eve ships, and it very much felt like it was just going to be a mod of Eve that was doing something slightly different. And then you show up 3 months later, and the team's like, "Oh yeah, no, it's totally different now. We've got a whole other plan." So it has been cool to kind of see that develop. But anyway, continue, please.
So I think some seed of that evolution was there from the very beginning, because this one-liner that we still utilize about the fact that if EVE Online is Arma, then Frontier is DayZ. That we used it from the very beginning to explain what is the delta between the original version and this mod. And then if we track the history of DayZ versus Arma, DayZ also eventually became its own thing, essentially spawned its own genre. So I guess we're just following in similar footsteps with this. But that still means that because it started like this, and we are still building on top of EVE Online legacy, you will still see a lot of things in the build itself, which will remind you of EVE Online, because we're literally carving it out of this block of marble that is EVE Online and building on top of it. But gradually, as you see already, there is less and less of that stuff, and more and more of our own things. The style where we're trying to land it is this, as we talked about a little bit already, is this mythical ancient future, like a techno-barbarian hellscape. What was a quote from one of the players that I really like. It's this monolithic, primal, almost biblical reality with a sense of this vast, unknowable forces steering in the infinity that are just outside of our capacity to just for perception, because we did not evolve for something like this. We did not evolve for space, and we're trying to capture that feeling. Again, Conan the Barbarian in post-apocalyptic megastructure ruins. Everything is unsolvable. Everything is vast. Humanity has long since been defeated already, and you're lost in all of this. And then visually, we're following a pseudo-realistic look. It's grounded in science in terms of the universe that we are representing,
sure.
But the representation is done through fictionally augmented lens. So if you imagine that there are some kind of augmented reality technologies in the future driven by some ancient AIs, and they're trying to feed the images of space into this kind of imperfect biology inherited from our planetary existence, and then they are translating these visuals into something that is a little bit easier for a human brain to grasp. So doing things such as, for example, maybe rendering some of radiation or some of these conditions as literal light or fog or something like this.
Right.
Because we will not see a lot of fog in space with naked eyes probably, but naked eyes are also probably not the best tool to observe actual space.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's a lot of fiction there.
Yeah, but this sort of makes sense too. It is providing almost an overlay of the universe, not just for the player character, but also the player behind the player character. I guess if that makes sense. So it's saying there are things. Yeah. And every game does that, right? You're not seeing, like, whenever you're walking through a game universe, you're not seeing pop-ups around you. And your player character is not seeing pop-ups around them either, ostensibly. Those are specifically for the person behind the screen, right?
Yeah. And so we, pretty early on, we defined a range of visual target images, these particular concepts that we're trying to replicate. These are some of them here to the right, not all of them. But yeah, and then the mission from that point on, once we look at that and we are happy with the look, how, what are we lacking to replicate this thing in the engine? Are we lacking anything? And in order to do that, we did quite a lot of Unreal Engine prototyping, even outside of our own engine. A lot of this look is coming also from like specific capabilities of Blender.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very specific kind of this airy, volumetric look that Blender is very capable of out of the box. So at some point we were even calling, like, our internal name for the style was Blender Core, because it's very reminiscent.
Nice. Very good.
So yeah, and then the time was to start experimenting and prototyping these things. And you can see in there how next one how it's already, even on that point, it's carving out its own niche relative to the EVE Online, because we're trying to be complementary with these two universes, and in a super simplified form, going beyond these ideas that EVE Online is a little bit more of this somewhat more aspirational space opera where things are possible, while this thing is a world where things are probably not possible anymore. Everything has collapsed. So one is more about the future, another one is, in a way, is more about the past, even though it's it's our future past kind of.
Sure.
But even if we step back, if we simplify that a lot, and we step back into this kind of the emotional psychology of colors, we can if we squint really hard and we look at just the overall range of science fiction out there. There are kind of people will hate me for this a little bit, but there are kind of two types of sci-fi there: the blue sci-fi and orange sci-fi. And the blue sci-fi is things like Expanse, maybe Ghost in the Shell. You use sometimes more near future stuff, sometimes more of the space opera stuff. And then there is brown sci-fi. It's things like Star Wars and Tatooine, or Dune. It's when everything is kind of dusty, gritty, and mythical. And EVE is the former for the most part, although it's a broad IP. There is a really large range of things. And with Frontier, we're trying to tackle a little bit more of the latter. So we have EVE Blue that we have already, and this EVE Red that we're building. So that's kind of that's the goalpost where we're headed. And and one of our missions to facilitate this vision was to upgrade our graphics capabilities. So not the way we do art or assets or concepts, but how we render things, how they're presented in the engine. And because this project in particular, being our kind of experimental test bed for the company, is an opportunity to just dramatically update our capabilities, which we then share with EVE, because it's the same engine, same technology. But it's much easier for us to do it here on Frontier, because it's a small team. We have good momentum. It's agile. We don't have a lot of content, so if we do a major change, we don't have to go back and redo a lot of things.
Right.
But a lot of these things, if these things work out, there are good chances that they get ported over. Some of them even just automatically, because it's such a core fundamental technology, will get ported over to the mothership, to EVE Online. There is also, for this project, there is obviously, because we're so far we're in the middle of development. It takes a lot of time to build the full MMORPG. There isn't any expectations for us of being final, right now, being out of the door, which again allows to experiment with things which we're shipping in a somewhat work in progress state, because individual features. So altogether, it's a perfect storm to do a graphics overhaul.
Hell yeah.
For both spaceships. Also kind of alert, trigger warning. We'll be talking somewhat nerdy stuff in some of these with some of these things. So do call me out if the terminology gets too far into the weeds. I'll try to explain.
I cannot imagine for the life of me that anybody who's watching this stream right now, a stream where two dudes sit here and talk about the way internet spaceships look, are going to have any issue with you using a little bit of jargon to explain how this operates. So, but I guess this is exciting though, right? I don't want to kind of bury the lead on this thing, but it is not, I think, probably an unpopular thing to say that Carbon has not always been the easiest engine to work with from a graphics point of view. It was built a long time ago, and the intention for what it was doing, while it has been able to produce incredible things, what it is, it's not Unreal, right? It's not this. It is trying to do a different kind of thing than what something like Unreal or something like, a name escapes me, but one of these other engines that are more graphics focused are capable of doing. So then being able to make this step forward, make this graphics leap forward is a huge deal. I mean, it's not just about the aesthetics of the thing; it's about how, what can we accomplish with the tools we have going into the future, right? It's future proofing, something that we have been working on for the last 20 years, which is kind of nuts. So take it away, please.
We did explore Unreal actually, and we did explore what our options on the table are to build this particular project, and we knew at that point already what kind of project this should be.
Sure.
And we just and Unreal was always tempting because really good graphical capabilities, but for something like what we're trying to do, this really large scale true MMO, not a bunch of rooms connected to each other, and then in total you have a lot of players there.
Sure.
But this single shard monster, once you start looking at and also single shard monster where you have to deal with just massive differences in scale. You have tiny things, you have very large things, very small things can get very close to very large things. It sounds kind of trivial, but once you start looking at the actual capabilities of engines out there, there is one engine that can handle these things successfully. We happen to have made it as a company because we had a similar game in the past.
Yeah.
So despite all of the interesting shortcomings of working with Carbon sometimes, it would just be impossible to realize this project with anything else. So it's very, very fruitful inheritance to possess from our progenitors. Because it is a perfect fit for something like this, especially when it comes to scale of things, because even like this isn't pure like graphical thing, but it's partially a graphical thing. Just dealing with the numbers of things being this varied in scale is a very non-trivial challenge.
Yeah.
Or handling physics at this scale with these many things. It's a kind of worms.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is maybe something that is kind of underappreciated about Eve in general and Carbon more specifically. Like, there are no objects in other games larger than suns in Eve. You can do it. You can orbit a sun in Eve right now. Like you could go around it currently. I've done it with DevTools. But you can do it. The capability is there for you to go around the sun and end up in the same place where you left. That is a staggering amount of space to orient yourself around, and for the game to then have to sort out how it's going to show you what all that is. So being able to do that is not a small feat. Yeah.
It is an unreasonable technology on many accounts. Someone at some point 1 year ago just didn't tell these guys that they shouldn't be doing this, and they just did it.
Yeah.
Which is, we can only be grateful.
Oh yeah.
But it does come with this project and technology comes with a bunch of interesting challenges, as the things that you mentioned already, where it's just 20 years of development is in there. So the age of individual tools or features is very, very varied. You have really cutting edge stuff, but then you have really, really archaic stuff that no one really even knows how it's working anymore. There is a lot of solutions in there that are like really, really surgically catered to a specific case it was there, at some point in time, but then it's just impossible to reuse that solution for anything else because everything is super bespoke, completely hard-coded. Some of the solutions, because there are these unique challenges, such as with scale, are very kind of idiosyncratic. Like they work really well, but then you bring someone in who has experience working with more traditional technology, and they're flabbergasted. They don't know what to do with it for some time. So it takes time to onboard people into why things are that way. And like all in all, it also adds up to this development environment, which in some aspects sometimes makes it difficult to iterate quickly, to experiment with shaders, with materials, because you need to know very, very well what you want to end up with in the end, and then you can execute on it. But if you want to, branch here, branch there, experiment with things a little bit, that can be super time consuming, which is why we have some solutions for that by leaning on other packages. So there are also missing capabilities both for our own project, but also just things that are existing in Eve, but existed in the past, but then the technology literally got lost just because so much time has passed.
Yeah.
So a lot of our initial process was more like archaeology. We just trying to dig through this wild mix of just cutting edge sci-fi tech and these crappy post-apocalyptic solutions, made for one purpose and not particularly reusable. And also this might sound somewhat dystopian. It's really not. There is a lot of fun in that, and it's also the outcomes that you are getting that way are very unique in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you who worked with any proprietary engines in the past, you are understanding the challenges pretty well. It's kind of the norm. If you're working outside of Unity or Unreal, it's always a little bit like that. In different degrees, but like that.
I made a Warhammer reference a second ago, and I think I may have been a little bit even premature with that reference. Do you feel sometimes like you are kind of in charge of a bunch of tech priests who are going out there and digging through ancient code to try and uncover secrets that
kinda
yeah
it gets quite literal. Sometimes you need to seek out, you get pointed to a particular tribe elder that you weren't even aware of, and no one even understands what they're saying anymore.
Have you ever had to seek out a man on a mountain?
Somewhere in the far corner of the office, and then sometimes you realize that you can recruit them into the case, and little by little we amass this understanding of what needs to be done.
Incredible.
In order to accomplish this insane feat.
Hell yeah.
Which is to build something of the scale of EVE Online. Just don't do this. Don't try this at home. Leave it to the professionals. I'm not sure if we are that even, but we will.
Yeah.
Also because fortunately we live in a much more modern world than 20 years ago. This time around there is just so much more kind of expertise amassed just across the global talent pool and interesting solutions which allow us to work around some of these challenges, such as, again, Unreal Engine. We leaned a lot on it for just prototyping and experimenting on things really quickly, especially when it comes to things like lighting, shaders, materials, because it has really, really, really strong out-of-the-box capabilities for this kind of stuff, for just going fast, which are also very artist-friendly. You don't need to be an engineer in order to go pretty deep, especially with things that have to do with graphics. So we leaned a lot on Unreal Engine, even early on, and still do. Where the process that we often end up with is we prototype something in there, and then we look at the results, and then we try to reverse engineer it for carbon implementation, and then whatever we end up there, we keep taking forward already, outside of Unreal Engine confines, because Unreal Engine is also it's flexible on some level, but then when we're creating these bespoke solutions, we can do pretty much anything. So we can cater really, really carefully to our needs. So it isn't just a copy of what we see in Unreal. It's
right.
Just using it as foundation and then building on top of it. But it's indispensable by now. So that's one of them. Another one is Blender. This is our main 3D suite, our main tech art suite. We do final 3D assets in it. We do concept art in it. We do procedural generation of things in it. I still sometimes talk to people who I think don't realize just how Blender has taken over the industry by the storm. I was talking to a friend just a few days ago. He's getting into 3D for some time now, and so he's he's saying that, yeah, I mean, I'm doing things in Blender right now, but I really want to finally get my hands on that Maya license so that I can do things properly. Dude, no, like that's just, it's 2025. Blender is where it's at. It's best in class capabilities on average, with some, with minor exceptions here and there for things like animation. It's open source. It's super extendable. So we're able to create this very delegatable processes in there. We recreate this very bespoke, very specific setup, and then we can ship it over to whoever, to a contractor, who then just downloads this completely free piece of software, open source package, and then they're free to go. It's completely impossible with something like some of these older archaic packages.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is just like a general advice. If you're getting into 3D or anything is 3D adjacent, and you're just do Blender. Just don't overthink it. Just go there. And that did allow us to it has this really nice capabilities to develop little tools. So our 3D guys and tech art guys, whenever we have these core capabilities missing in our actual in-house technology, historically we were able to just develop something quite quickly, just there in Blender, and then lean on that potentially kind of forever. We might not even replace some of these things with our internal tools, because open source, like this thing will hopefully live just forever.
Yeah. Unlike
some of these paid packages, which just eventually someone buys them, then drives them into the ground, and then it disappears from the landscape, and these things just survive, same as things like Linux. So so this is where we started, and so here we can talk a little bit about the particular shiny toys that we were working on.
Okay.
Like the specific capabilities that we had to discover, rediscover, or implement, that then we used to realize the vision. First things first, I can't take credit for any of it. I'm not a graphics engineer. I'm not even a technical artist, and this is mostly their domain. So I have almost no idea what I'm talking about. Not quite, because I'm mostly the first half of my career was mostly in 3D. So I know what happens at the end of this entire process and what we use these things for. But some of the the very back end parts of this process to me is just some kind of black magic, and very impressive black magic too.
Hell yeah.
A lot of this is also very work in progress. We mentioned this already, or a lot of these things are maybe the feature is done, but then it's not very calibrated towards the final look. So it might be a little bit too shiny, or something like that. So expect it to look even better when it's in your hands, which should be soon with some of these. So first things first, we work quite a bit on lighting, where it's not a super realistic setup in terms of the visual spectrum, what you would see with their naked eyes when you're out there in space. It's more this diegetic fiction that is going on there, where some of the things such as radiation are represented as light as minutes walk. We're exaggerating some of the reflected lighting a little bit to make things just a little bit more, airy, dusty, more tangible. We rediscovered ray traced shadows to shape things a little bit better. And overall, what we're trying to achieve there is create this noticeable, or rather meaningful, variance in lighting conditions across different star systems, obviously, but more importantly, across a given star system. So as you can see, we have this concept gradient there, where the further away you go from the star, from the sun in the star system, the lighting conditions are meaningfully changing. And you can see some of the experiments here in the video, where in the background we are tweaking the lighting conditions. It doesn't affect the background in this case, but you can see how it goes.
Whew.
Pretty.
Yeah.
If you're really close to the star, it's it needs to be kind of intense, and then vice versa. If you go further away from the star, the background nebula should dominate the image a little bit more, because the exposure is dynamically compensating for the amount of light. Yeah, this does a lot, and also provides very interesting variety to the space scenes, because in real life space is not a very varied environment. It's mostly empty. There's just not much stuff there. So we're leaning on things like this in order to create this sense of, quote unquote, different biomes happening there within the confines of a star system. This is also where this is very, very fresh. I'm pretty sure you saw this a few days ago. This is where we cracked the code on having ray traced shadows work with alpha planes, where sometimes in order to create detail, we don't use actual geometry. It's just a plane with transparent pieces. So this is what we use to create these, these little frames and this kind of stuff. And we didn't used to have them cast shadows. And now, as you can see, everything is very crisp and very, very shadowy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very good.
Yeah, I think this is new as of like yesterday, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. There is a bunch of stuff in this one that is completely, fresh off the press. Then, another thing that we iterated quite a bit in conjunction with lighting is just all sorts of post-processing effects. It's stuff that is usually screen effects. Once you render the entire image, you do these things on top of everything else. So it's things like the color correction when we need to tint the colors a little bit, or in this particular example in the video, it's dynamic exposure. So it's a capability for the image to adjust automatically depending on the just amount of brightness in the scene. So when you look at the star, for example, it adjusts a little bit. If you look at the nebula, it also adjusts a little bit, which creates this nice cinematic feel to the image. But then it also creates this nice automatic variety to things that are looking at. We also now we have a little bit more control over how we employ all of these post-processing effects, because now we finally have something that Unreal has, for example, and that is post-processing volumes. We can designate an area in space, and then when you enter this area, you blend into some kind of a post-processing setup. You can see how here it either desaturates or it goes into this. I think one of these is going to be this juicy signal loss effect. This thing. And we can blend between them. We can have spheres instead of spheres, which are kind of excluding this effect from the rest of the sphere. They can be of different shapes. And this allows us to create a world that has these localized biomes, localized conditions, as opposed to just switch between two settings when you, for example, enter a site or enter a new star system, because that can be just kind of abrupt and jarring. This allows us to be much more fluid with these things.
Are these volumes, are these dynamic, or they have to be like scene emplacements, right? Are these things that you can have generate on a whim? Because I'm imagining like the noise that keeps popping up in this. I can imagine that being a powerful example of like a weapon being used, right? If you get jammed in Frontier, and instead of just your weapons stop functioning the way you want to, your screen goes into a haze for a period of time. Is that something that we can generate dynamically like that, or is this something that has to be?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's just we can't spawn objects. This is just another object. So in theory, nothing is stopping us.
Sick.
I can already see how because these things are completely graphical and they're happening purely on the client side. I think there will be people who will just hack through it and will not even know that it's happening. So it can be the main detriment to the receiving side of the tool. But if it's a flavor element to it or something that is also happening somewhere deeper mechanical on the server side, then for sure. We also have an update on this effect that a lot of you will be very familiar from, if you remember this era of PlayStation 3 games when everything was, it had a lot of this effect. Everything was kind of very, very, like it's covered in soap or something.
Yeah.
When we, as an industry, we discovered Bloom, and it allowed us to make things just a little bit softer than, you know, these really hard cut polygonal shapes.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, as with any new tool, we overdid it just a bit. So at some point, it became kind of an unfortunate cliche to use it. But when it's used in really small amounts, it's a very nice way to soften things a little bit, to sit them inside of the scene. And these can also go kind of funky. It doesn't have to be just a light blob.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see here, we have all sorts of interesting shapes to them.
More like a lens
so
flare.
This is a very nice, It's
cool.
A very nice fundamental capability to have, where we do utilize a bunch of these, where we use each of them within a very, very small amount, but then, and if you add just one of them, you don't really see the before and after difference sometimes. But when you add the entire stack of them and you try it before and after, suddenly the entire image is just a little bit more tangible, a little bit more realistic, for lack of a better word. Now, this is a recent favorite. So it's we have a new screen space ambient occlusion algorithm. So it's a custom one. It's a homebrew algorithm of one of our graphics engineers. And what screen space ambient occlusion does is that we can bake this map onto the ship that really, or to the asset that really helps with lighting. So here, this asset is not really lit by any light sources. All of the shadows are coming from this screen space ambient occlusion. This is the traditional technique. That is what we used to have before. And you can see how it does a lot for the definition of shape,
mm-hmm.
but it's kind of blurry. It's not super well defined.
Yeah.
And now we have this. It's just super, super crisp.
Yeah.
This is cutting edge technology. You can see here already a little bit. We'll get to that a little bit later, but it does a lot for just the final fidelity of the ships, because it allows the new texture resolution and the new shaders, really shine and really pop.
Clean,
here
I think,
the before and after.
Yeah, it
much
just feels
cleaner,
clean.
Yeah, cleaner and much sharper, much
mm-hmm.
more crisp.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like, the effect that it gives in when it's composited with the rest of the loopless textures and stuff like that. And it's relatively subtle until you start looking closely. But then when you look at things when these deeper cavities, deeper, just the deeper parts of the model, you can see how it's adding a lot, like here in the engines, for example, or here in the engines.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it be just much more realistic.
Yeah.
This still looks a little bit like just a 3D model floating in editor. This sits in the world already.
Yeah.
Yeah, some juicy close-ups, which already, this also starts to showcase a little bit the upcoming fidelity of the ships, just how much interesting little crisp detail you can see up close, which is another area where we're trying to up our game as much as possible, because it's again about spaceships.
Nice.
That would make sense. Yeah, the next one, fog. We really, if you think about this look that we're going for, this epic, monumental, large scale things, we obviously, starting from the very beginning, started to rely on fog quite a lot in our concept art explorations, and then only to discover that the fog kind of doesn't. It's partially lost technology in carbon. So that was a little bit of a problem. But yeah, not anymore. We now have this really nice distance fog that you can see in action here, which we overuse in a good way whenever we have to present a large structure, a stargate or an asteroid or something like that, to sell that sense of scale, because this is one of the ultimate scale cues. With the same caveat in mind that this is probably not what you would see with your naked eye. It would probably be just complete darkness if you were there in space. This is what you would see before you would die, because there is no air. But so this is a heavily augmented image. And this fog, this distance fog that you can see going over the entire screen, is one layer of this similar haze and fog stuff that we utilize. And another layer is similar kind of idea, but it's volumetric fog, volumetric clouds. So this is not a screen effect. These are literal 3D blobs of, fog, matter that you can get inside of. You can fly past them, which we also spam quite a bit as our signature effect, because it's doing a lot for a sense of density, for a sense of density of scene or depth. It creates this parallax effect of going past things, which otherwise can be a little bit of a challenge in space scenes, because let's say you're this little spaceship and you're traveling to this large space station in the distance. There isn't just a lot of frame of reference objects around you to even tell you that you're traveling. We're cheating a little bit with things such as these little screen space particles passing past your ship, just to create a sense of speed. But this allows us to make these aspects much more tangible.
Yeah, I mean, and that is something I feel like people just don't really appreciate, especially when they, those little screen space particles for sure, but also just without those and without some sort of either fogging or without some kind of other frame of reference, the only frame of reference you have for speed is how quickly things around you get bigger or smaller. And if those things are already huge, that can be difficult, right? That can be So neat. I love this shot. The one before it, I think I like even better. The idea of large things coming out of the fog is just so good.
It just does something to the animal brain. It just works.
Yeah, the lizard brain in there just so.
Yeah.
So hell yeah.
Yeah, it's big. And we also we had to go through some adventures to get these things to work together with each other, because as any of you who worked with, I'm not sure, this is not playing for some reason. Any of you who worked with 3D before know that transparent things just really don't like. A, they don't like to work. B, then they don't like to work, in conjunction with each other whenever they're overlapping. So if this thing will,
it may have just not loaded. We can. I'll throw this video. If you send me this video, I'll throw it in the Discord after the fact.
Yeah, we can do that.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, there we demonstrate how these things interact with each other in a cool, really good way. Next one, what we sometimes call God rays or just volumetric lighting. It's another thing that we spanned aggressively in our early concept art, because it does create this biblical sense, like this biblical space effect. So we knew pretty early on that we need to be able to utilize this somewhat arbitrarily in order to achieve our intended look. So this is where some of the efforts went into giving us more control over this effect, into making it work with all of the other components. For example, this thing does work with those volumetric clouds too. The rays are shining through.
Well, I was going to say, because the God rays almost imply a haze, right? Like you're not seeing God rays if there's not something for them to be reflecting off of. This is
Yeah, and they can be animated. They can have all different sorts of noise overlaid on top of them, so that we can create all sorts of different environmental effects. Yeah, this is very, very powerful. I expect to see a lot of these until people will start complaining.
Never, not once.
And then, and it allows us to construct these really, really juicy scenes.
Yeah.
And you're playing with scale once again, and going even bigger. So this is also like I'm not sure if we can get it in the game just yet, but this is in the editor, so it's very this isn't concept art. This is doable. So next one, we are constantly working on upgrading our instancing capabilities, which is this capacity to render repeating elements efficiently. So if you have one object and then you make 100 copies of it, you spend as much performance as you would spend on just one copy, which is, needless to say, it's very useful for things like complex space scenes, especially when we're dealing with all of these modular structures,
sure,
or large fields of asteroids where you have a lot of repeating stuff. And it also allows to be quite aggressive with things like surface greeble in order to create things that can hold up really, really up close when you get to them, which is, of course, one of the unique challenges of a project like this. You can be this tiny, tiny spaceship, and then you have this huge Stargate, and you can get really, really up close to it.
Yeah.
We will lean onto this quite a bit once we will get into proper capital ship territory, not just large ships. This is how we will be handling the greeble there.
Interesting. Capital ship territory.
That is for the future.
Yes.
Yeah, but
I think somewhere CCP Bruder just sat up in his chair. He didn't know why. Sorry, never mind. Go ahead.
So, and this is getting finalized right now. We are already experimenting with actual assets in the game, and that is new shaders, completely bespoke shaders to support new fidelity level for pretty much all of the asset categories in the project, because we have our own unique needs, which we found were not satisfied by the legacy shaders that we had, because they were done for very different purposes. So we are our first and the worst case, because this is where there is the most complexity, was the hard surface stuff. It's the ships, structures, and turrets, primarily the ships, because this is where we had to start. And you can see here already how there is just quite a bit more fidelity is showing through than what we used to be able to do, or what you see in the build even right now. It's the same ship that you start with. So ships is where we started. Then the next one is, we are finalizing this one too, is the shader for natural objects. So things like asteroids, but not only asteroids. Some of the cosmetic deployables that we are giving to the players are also done with a similar shader. And similar goals are pursued here. We're trying to create something that can hold up really, really, really up close, so that you can get really close to these large asteroids, and it doesn't look like a PlayStation 2 game.
Yeah.
This needs some calibration, because as you can see, it's kind of shiny, but the overall intended look should be, when we saw it a few screenshots ago when we were talking about Unreal Engine, this is us trying to replicate that same material in Carbon. So, and finally, characters, which is another unique kind of worms, because there we start to deal with very kind of specific use cases, such as skin and hair. We don't have a lot of hair and skin on ships, not yet at least.
No, give it time.
So maybe eventually. So this is tackled separately. This stuff is not, the character features themselves are not super close on the horizon, because we need to pick our battles, and there is a lot of stuff to get done in the core gameplay. but we are very actively building out the foundational capabilities, as you can see here.
That hair shot is
also trying to update fidelity.
Yeah, that hair shot is competitive with any other. I mean, that you could tell me that is a shot out of, I don't know, any number of other AAA titles, and I would believe you. The fact that it's being rendered in carbon is kind of nuts, honestly.
Yeah. Next one, Skyboxes. So, I mean, it's somewhat of a game dev specific term, but if you think about how the sky is rendered around you in any given game, or in most of them, it's usually just a polygonal box with a texture on top of it. It's a panoramic texture. So we are updating that technology on our end also a little bit, where we take these really high resolution HDR nebula textures and we try to add, or we are actively adding a layer on top of them, which is dynamic, reactive to the position in the world, both in the region, but more importantly in the region, like which star system are you in.
Sure.
So that we can do things such as, let's see, we should see some editing here. So such as you can see this, right? Where we can use it to create some one, because this is just testing with some random colors, but when we'll see it in more action a little bit later on, we are able to use these things to, for example, designate the galactic core, and then everything else is darkened. And the closer you get to the galactic core, the shape of the nebula is changing, utilizing these kinds of masks. So that allows us to make this a little bit of softer, almost procedural generated kind of aspects to the world, which then we combine with positional landmark elements, which some of the players I think are noticing in the sky. And altogether, it allows us to create a sense of just traveling through the universe, as opposed to just looking at the same background. In this system, in the next system, in the next system over. It should be a little bit more alive as a world. I think this is the most recent thing. This is also, I think, from yesterday or from the day before. Another thing that is completely fresh.
And that is, I love this shot so much.
It looks good, yeah, and it's also here you can see how we're still pretty far from the center of the galaxy. The galactic horizon is only seen in this limited hemisphere, and then the further in we go, like somewhere here, suddenly we're much more deeper into the galaxy, and it starts to be around us. And then I think somewhere here we will be jumping all the way into the core. And now it's all around us.
Bro.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, dude.
And then we go back into the outskirts. And like these things, even me immediately, they make me think about things. I think I would like to live somewhere in the outskirts, because I just, I like the vista.
Yeah.
It's all dark around you, but then you have this cool stuff there.
I mean,
and then I would build my little base here.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's really very good.
It is. This is why we have 3 slides about it.
Yeah, no shit. So here's, I guess, the next question before we jump into the next next section is, I mean, the question that's going to lead from this, and I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to mention it. I'm looking into the future now. Are there going to be black holes in the skybox? We got 3 of them.
There are. So without any spoilers, if we look at this one,
oh boy,
occasionally you see these mysterious. Let's find them.
There are
mysterious objects.
Yes.
In the sky. I think we might maybe. Oh. Yeah. What is that?
Oh my!
Like these guys.
Yeah.
What is that? So this is our prototype for these positional landmark elements. It's things that exist there in space between systems or in systems, and that are large enough to be seen or somehow signposted in the skybox. So if we will ever see black holes or maybe rifts or anything like that. It would be something like this. Maybe not exactly this,
sure,
but this kind of technology. This is just prototyping for now.
Of course.
But yes, there will be things that you can see in the nebula that are positional, that are representative of something that is located somewhere on the global star map.
Neat.
Watch that space.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I should have gotten.
So this is
Keep talking.
This was the shiny stuff, the tools. The next segment that we have, we can go over really quickly over the things, over the actual content, over what we're bringing into the build using these capabilities. So this is a little bit more into the actual assets, and more importantly, for this slide, into the strategy for how we are bringing those assets into the project. And what we're trying to do in general is we are optimizing for value in the build. So instead of waiting for a long time until the final asset is complete, we're trying to get something very rough quickly and then put it into the game, play around with it, give it to the players if there is a use for this asset for the players, and just cut a lot of corners, while then in the background we can invest into refining the asset into final quality.
Mm-hmm.
This has implications for how we do things like concept art even. So this guy up top, this is our concept model. So we don't do a lot of this traditional old school 2D concept art. We concept a lot of these things directly in 3D. So that allows us to put something like this into the game pretty much immediately. And then in the background, it's being worked up into something that is properly modeled, UV textured, and then eventually it ends up as something like this. And how this process manifests for the players will be pretty familiar to them, because most of the assets that we have in the game right now are somewhere at this stage, minus the textures, and so this is why everything looks the way it looks right now. This is our way to initially go kind of broad but shallow, so that we can create a good volume of content without over-investing into going deep and narrow. And then right about now, we are ready to go deep and narrow on some of these assets and start polishing them up into final 3D assets.
You mean to tell me that Samoskid model is not supposed to be made out of like Jenga blocks? I don't know if you've, not this one, obviously.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
No. Eventually, it will be remade out of a much smaller Jenga blocks.
Gotcha.
They're so small that you can't really see them.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. And the main category of assets there is kind of obvious. It's spaceships, because we are a game about spaceships primarily. And our unique niche there is obviously ships in particular. They're not starfighters. Like the smallest thing that we're dealing with is like a space boat. Yeah. Not a space plane. Mm-hmm. So that's this is where we're trying to land. These pieces of really, really heavy machinery, which are large scale, realistic, and importantly, true to scale. We're trying to be very, very precise with how, what is the size of a door? Is the size of a door of the same size on this shape or on that shape? Mm-hmm. Everything is very precisely calculated, which even has implications for the economy. Whenever we calculate the costs of ships, this has very tangible connection to the volume of the ship. So we are trying to calculate how much stuff would actually go into building this thing, so that it's all connected on the layer of digital physics.
Do you do the math too when you're talking about? You said how much stuff goes into building a ship. Like looking at that last ship, so that was a Val, or whatever the name we're using for it, the Val.
Yes.
It has, obviously, it has a certain amount of cargo space available. Do we look at that cargo space and say, okay, we think this is about this much space, and so that's what the real space of the vessel is actually going to be able to hold?
In principle, yes. Mm-hmm. It's not a given that the current numbers are representative of this, whatever you're playing with in the game.
Right.
But Otherwise, yes, because this is something that this is a territory where we're somewhat sinful historically sometimes. If you sit down and look at some of even line ships, especially put them side by side, you can start seeing some just strange space magic happening there when it comes to the size of cargo holds or the relative sizes of ships. And so now that we're building this from the ground up, we're trying to establish the foundations for this in a way where that homework is done beforehand, and then we will not break these things anymore.
Sick.
And yeah, as usual, as mentioned many times, doing really up in our game when it comes to fidelity and representing all of these little handrails and all of the little crisp details on these large chunks of machinery. This is one of our ways to expose this almost archaeological history of the world, because all of these ships are products of different cultures, and you can see the ideologies and the technologies of these cultures represented in how the ships are designed. So all of these are these tangible vestiges of civilizations that established presence at frontier at some point and inevitably perished. So here you can see that these three guys are obviously from different cultural backgrounds. All of these are mining ships. They have very, very different sensibilities. And as mentioned, we concept them in 3D first. All of these are concepts. These are not the things that are going into the game. And all of them are designed to be true to scale. But
I want to interject here real quick. So all three of these ships are not really anything that players have seen before at all, ever.
This guy has seen some action. I think it's called Peaky.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the small mining frigate. Yeah, it looks different when it has its textures.
Right. So I guess the question then is, because people have asked, do we have just a backlog category of ships or models or things that have been maybe sketched out but not necessarily planned out long term yet? Or in other words, what we've got in the game right now is not just what it is. There are more assets there. They just have not quite come to fruition yet.
Way more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Way more. And this is one of the benefits of this process where we go broad but shallow. For example, this is just one of what you can see here, one of the lineups of ships that we have. So we have just a backlog of things that we can put into the game, take out from the game, experiment with, until we have a good sense of priorities on what we need to polish up first. We have that sense of priorities for some lineups now, but yes, there is a lot of stuff accumulated there that we can play around with.
Nice.
So, and then on the going back to the graphics side of things, how we're utilizing the shader that we talked about in the beginning or a few slides ago to implement this into the game, is our process is very heavily relying on this very high res reusable Atlas textures. It's a similar, like for some of you who have done 3D in the audience, this is similar to very old school tiled approaches that we used to do maybe, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, but reinvented with new fidelity, with these new shaders, new technology. So it achieves a few things. Because it's a tiled texture, it allows us to, unlike a bespoke texture, it allows us to have very, very high texture fidelity. We can get to things really up close in whatever scale. But it's also, in our case, it has almost a concept art dimension to it. Because each of these texture atlases is representing a specific manufacturing origin, like a culture or a faction that created this, or a type of utility, like industrial utility or combat utility, that is behind a particular set of assets. And then when we utilize this atlas for all of the assets in that same set, it allows us to scale that set quite quickly. Once we have this atlas, we can add more and more ships pretty fast. But everything stays in style. Like it boxes the style of a manufacturer in a very organic way, in a similar way that is happening in real life. If
Sure.
if you're Toyota, you have these certain parts that you're reusing, and then or certain tools, and then that makes everything have this bespoke house style. And yeah, it creates a very optimized process too, where the only unique maps that we make for the assets are just technical quote unquote maps that we automate creation of those, and we don't have to do anything bespoke once we're done with each of these atlases.
Sick.
Yeah, and it's actively once a single atlas is done, then it also it has this feedback loop of reinforcing the concept process too, because then the concept artist gets this atlas, and then they can start designing ships with basically just UVing parts of the ship on top of this atlas, and going A, much quicker than before. B, again, everything stays in style. And so the stuff that you see here on the right, this is a part of the concept process. This is what the concept mesh looks like in Blender. And then it translates into the actual 3D asset quite predictably that way. And the actual 3D assets then eventually look like something like this.
Yeah.
And here you can see how this atlas aspect is manifesting. Both of these are textured with the same texture atlas, and it doesn't mean that the two ships are going to look exactly the same, but they do look like they're manufactured by the same entity, or designed by the same entity, which is the idea. And once you have one of these done, then going to this one and to next one gets faster and faster with each one, because you already have that foundational piece done there.
Sure.
And yeah, and it allows us to go pretty crisp with just the fidelity and with the resolution. Like you can see how you can see this
like
individual little
plates.
plating pieces. Yeah, and all sorts of these tiny slots and rivets and this kind of stuff.
Sick.
Yeah, this is also still not completely final. This is very close to final, but this is what you will see in the game will be at least of this fidelity level.
Hell yeah.
Very promising. Then, of course, what goes on top of ships is the things that make other ships explode. It's big guns, small guns, various sizes of guns. There isn't really that much to add here compared to what we talked about with the ships. Turrets are essentially smaller ships that go on top of other ships,
yes,
technically speaking.
Yeah, of course.
With the somewhat more complex animations, though, sometimes, because they go into the hull, they reload, and so on. But otherwise, it's fairly self-explanatory, and a lot of the same logic is applied there. We also create one bespoke atlas, and then we can reuse that atlas for all of the turrets of the same manufacturer.
Sick. I think that's not something, because a lot of the I don't mean to maybe wax too romantically about this, but a lot of the gun models I think in the game right now are obviously reused assets, or assets that we just we had available, and so we're using those. And so seeing some of these, I mean, this is those turrets in the middle. I mean, these kind of almost artillery looking pieces are just so good. That's so very good. That is, like, when you talk about the kind of grungy, dusty, I can see one of these things being like this sort of almost World War II era, artillery piece. Some just kind of rolled out and strapped onto a ship and said, "Have at it, make it happen." That's really good. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And once again, as with the ships, also trying to be really careful with staying true to scale. Like these things are large, and it's represented in the concept art and in the design, which is a little bit of a step away from some of the what we would see in more these traditional RTS games or something like this, which are more optimized for a specific screen space size, because everything is always of the same zoom level. Our strategy is a little bit more, in some sense, even more simplistic, but that is coming from from various places, and that is just being true to scale.
Sure.
Because there isn't a given scale to the project. You can go really, really small and really, really large, and the most sensible thing to do at that point is just do what real life does, which is what we're trying to do.
Hell yeah.
And then turrets are obviously just the most obvious module that goes onto your ship, but there are more modules than that. And this is another area where we're trying to elevate a little bit the capabilities and that we inherited from Eve, and have to have just more module representation on your ship hull, more just pure ship modularity, where if you install a cargo extender, you can see it attached somewhere on your ship, and doing something similar with other modules that can go into your ship. It will be not super mega utilized for now on the smaller ships, but we can expect this to spam this capability a little bit more on capital ships, where we can go into some interest in modularity.
So you foresee a future where if somebody shows up and their ship is just absolutely covered in armor plates, that is indicative of the fact that they actually are covered in armor plates. It's not just it's not just a visual thing. You're seeing that, oh, they have put plates on their ship, and so then you have to recognize, oh, that's what this is. Or you see, a certain kind of, antenna sticking up in the back. You're like, oh, that's some kind of, information finding device. Keep an eye on that guy. He can see things that we can't see, sort of situation.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, with caveats, one caveat is we'll see when we will actually be able to do this in the engine. Another caveat being that because we're keeping things realistic, some of these things are mostly going to be noticeable for the owner of the ship when they're fitting their ship and you see things changing. If you install a little sensor module on your ship,
sure,
realistically, that is probably what's the external footprint of that is. Maybe a little antenna, a little radome. It will probably not be visible from far away.
Sure.
But then for a very expert player who zooms in really close and looks at the enemy ship, yes, they should. They have this new mastery dimension to recognize the capabilities of their enemy from these little telltale things.
Hell yeah.
Again, similar to real life, these things are not very on the nose in actual.
Obvious exceptions being things that take up a lot of volume, right? So like cargo containers, certainly guns, armor.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. A few other asset categories that are similar is all things to do with structures, with things that the players can deploy. So smart assemblies, which are these heavily customizable units that the players are assembling their bases out of, and the backbone of all of the modability and programmability in the game. But also things that are not as smart, such as just fortifications, things that you cannot program, but which are still useful. And there, it's a similar situation to what we're doing with ships and turrets. It's also a hard surface asset that you can get to really close. Similar shading and texturing techniques utilized there. And of course, massive decorative items, where this is another scale challenge. This should be the scale of this. If you see these little ships for scale, there should be something like, if you imagine what does a self-respecting Neolithic tribe does once they're a little bit out of a complete low life situation, they start to build huge monoliths to impress other tribes and maybe impress their deities. And we're trying to facilitate something like this, but multiplied by space scale. So these guys are very, very large and need to hold up very, very up close. So a lot of the same techniques are utilized here. But this time around closer to what we're doing with asteroids, because it's a little bit more of a natural object case. There is also obviously all of the feral stuff as an asset category, but we can't talk about ferals. Just watch out for anything feral or for any feral information. Feral code is neurocompatible. Just always watch your back.
Of course,
be careful out there.
Keep an eye out.
Nothing else on these guys.
Only thing on the frontier that scares CCP Goodfella is ferals. It's true.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's
we will not discuss ferals.
No, never. And then, yeah, of course, the nebula that are populating the skyboxes. This is where all of this stuff that we just mentioned, where it exists. It's the main backdrop, this giant scientifically simulated region of space, where the nebulas we derive from a range of astrophotography vision modes. I think X-ray, infrared, and so on. Some less fictional, some a little bit more speculative, but they're all grounded in science in their own way. High resolution, HDR, and these are going back to the Blender point in the very beginning. All of these are made out of pre-rendered Blender particles. So if you ever find yourself inspired to learn to do something like these guys to the left here, Blender is not a bad place to start.
Nice.
Maybe it's a good place to enter to. And this is what they currently look like in the build. This is also from a few days ago.
Nice.
A few little things here and there. We have new sun flares. It's this little sprite that goes on top of a star that when you see it from far away, the local star of the system, the local sun. Because this is one of these key graphical elements that are somewhat subtle, but then they have a lot of contribution to creating this sense of something that's a little bit less, sci-fi with these horizontal lens flares and stuff like that, but it's a little bit more, more mythical.
Sure.
With these kinds of shapes. There is a bunch of stuff that is happening in terms of content on the character side of things, obviously, where our initial releases will be focusing on these standardized clone bodies, such as the ones that you're inhabiting right now. But we also have actual character creator work that is underway, where in both cases where we're really trying to up the fidelity and ultimately end up with an ultimate post-human character creator, where you can go really deep into these ideas of transhumanism or pantropy, which is this idea that maybe it's better not to terraform worlds, but kind of form humans to adapt to different conditions. Because Frontier is this just fundamentally inhospitable place to life in any forms. So we are giving the players these tools to shape themselves into a form which can try to survive there, and maybe with some finesse, maybe even thrive there eventually. So again, not super close on the horizon in terms of the engine itself, or actual the build rather. But as you can see, there is some stuff cooking there. And there also we are, as you can see on the top. In the top video, we are leaning on Unreal to prototype things, and then they find their way into Carbon, which you can see here at the bottom. So they're already there. So when we say that it's not super close on the horizon, it doesn't mean 10 years or anything like that.
Sure.
You will see them in action sooner rather than later.
Nice.
Then, of course, megastructures. This is where all of these things like instancing or shader techniques are utilized to construct this one of the backbones of Frontier. It's all of this vast sprawl of derelict infrastructure and another layer of archaeology where we have a lot of these. It's not clear if any of them were even ever populated, but somewhere some marks of extinct cultures, where altogether we're trying to create this sense of this, traveling in this dead space Moria in space wasteland. And the usual challenge there is that these things are large. And you can get really, really up close to them. You can fly really, really up close to a Stargate, for example. And at that point, and this is what we see on screenshots here, this is just floating over a Stargate. And at that point, they become closer to small levels than space assets. So that is a unique challenge which we're solving by just leaning onto some just extreme modularity, where we construct these Lego kits as what you see in the left, and then everything is instanced and reused out of these Lego kits to construct larger composite objects, such as what you see to the right. And also similar to what we're doing to ships, these very modular, reusable, tileable texture atlases, so that the resolution holds up in any situation, within reason or within the capacities of technologies known to mankind in year 2025.
Sick.
Then, similar stuff we are utilizing to construct all sorts of just smaller space rocks and bigger space rocks, asteroids, and whatever other natural objects you might expect in space. Probably not that many, aside from various forms of space rocks. But here too, you can see both of these are experiments in Unreal. But as you also saw in the very beginning, it's already making its way into Carbon.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where to shed some light on the actual practicalities of how these things are going through the process. This is our internal slide. We'll see if I'll get told off for revealing this much of our the internal kitchen.
Uh-huh.
But these are our plans for art assets for ships and for turrets for the foreseeable future. Not the full picture, but some of it. And what you can see here, or at least what I can see here, is that we are aiming to start delivering final quality ships. Like sometime around June, we should have 4, 6 done, and then 7th one done and on the way. So this is where we are getting out of that situation of broad and shallow and start narrowing down on specific assets to get them to this final super juicy AAA, quadruple A quality.
Nice.
Not everything at the same time, but one by one you will see more and more stuff coming to the game, because most of the things that you see right now are representative of the intended designs, or many of the things, so these things that are not used from Eve, but are all in various stages of prototype states.
Right.
And of course, some stuff is just reused. There are a bunch of things that are there on the horizon that we haven't tackled yet, but which will make its way into the plans in the future. So it's things such as planets. We didn't really do much with planets yet. We updated the shader a little bit. Now they sit much nicer in the environment. They used to feel a little bit like they're these little stamps posted on top of a wallpaper. But now they're more like what we see here to the right or to the left. They work together with fog, with the rest of the lighting conditions, and now it feels like they're right there in the scene with the rest of the stuff. We are actively working on some concepts for these once we are ready to start producing assets. But this is for now. Things like spaceships are taking priority because I think it's just more important to have more and better spaceships in a game about spaceships. But all in some time.
Indeed.
VFX is another interesting challenge that we have in the foreseeable future. This is where, if you remember the beginning of our chat, this is where our existing capabilities are at their most, for lack of a better word, arcane. Because everything is kind of hard-coded. Whenever the VFX artist needs to create something, they need to work in tandem with an engineer to create these bespoke capabilities right there on the spot, which is it's daunting at scale. So while we're able to do some things, such as this new warp effect, for example, in the future we will need to be looking or putting some effort into improving the core capabilities. So for some time, chances are that the progress on this end, explosions and the other things, will be relatively slow. Not completely non-existent, but slow. But fortunately, this is also one of the areas where we can lean on the massive inheritance of Eve Online quite successfully. There are so many explosions that are done there already that we are not in dire need for some time.
Sure.
Skins are also somewhere on the horizon. Once we're at a better place with the core assets of ships themselves, we will be moving on to things such as first color material swaps and things like paint jobs. but also we are leaning heavier than in the past onto just model variations, where if you have some kind of a variation, cosmetic variation of an asset, it's the hull itself that is also affected visibly. Not at a super dramatic scale, but if you look closely to it, if you look at these two guys, for example, you can see how this engineering variation has different things happening there on the hull, while this one is just a material swap of the default Corvette. And other little immersion tweaks are also happening. Like this is very technically kind of small, but then it's adding so much for this sense of being lost in this dark, forgotten universe.
There was a system. I don't remember which playtest it was last in. I think it was maybe phase 4 last year. Phase 3 last year, where there was a system you could jump into. And the system was just black. Like there was no sun in the system, and your initial you started at one end. It was not a very big system either. You started at one end at a gate, and in front of you was an asteroid field that was just dark, and on the other end was another gate. And so you could see some of the light from the other gate, but to get there you had to. Your ship had a single light on the front of it that kind of you could see what was right in front of you. And it was about the coolest thing I'd ever seen in a space game, because you really did feel like you were in the woods with a lantern, just kind of like making your way through, right?
Survival.
Yeah. I think that's
So definitely
cool.
We're not letting this one go until it happens. Like there are some challenges there if we're making these lights actual dynamic lights, but adding just these cosmetic spotlights, this should be very trivial.
Nice.
But it's a trivial thing on a long list of other things. So we'll see.
Neat.
And finally, all of this work on lighting and on shaders is building towards it's a holistic composite update on the way we render things, which is building towards one of the things that it's building towards is empowering us to do more advanced things with decals. Because if you think about the way we discussed, the way we approach ships in particular, where everything is relying on this tile texture, that means that it can be tricky to put something very specific and very bespoke in a particular area of the asset if it wasn't present in this atlas already. And we can work around that with just modeling things in with geometry, but it will be much better if we will be able to just supplement this with decals, which can get pretty advanced with modern technology, with parallax mapping, which makes it look not like a flat sticker on top of the asset, but as an actual three-dimensional thing. So in this example that you see here, this is the extrusion here, and this thing, this is all technically just a 2D texture, but because of parallax mapping, it looks like it's modeled in there.
Sick.
So this will be, this is our pie in the sky. And we'll get there, I think, sooner rather than later. We're getting to the end. This is how we will build towards this new era of virtual worlds.
Nice.
With our ultimate moddable sandbox MMO together, awake and eternally.
Hell yeah. Just looking at all of this, obviously it is, I feel like for people who have been following the project for a long time, it's got to be, it has to feel good, right? To see a lot of these things that have been planned. Because, some of these shots I remember seeing as recent or as far long ago as like May of last year, maybe. And to see them now sort of coming into fruition and actually, getting to a state where I could go into a client right now into the most current build of the visual target build and start to see some of these things in practice that I can get into and I can get my hands on. That's got to feel pretty. And I imagine it has to feel great from you guys too. Your team has been just absolutely working their asses off
for sure. Yeah. There are some shots which we were discussing a long time ago and saying that there is no way we can do this, and now we can do them.
Hell yeah.
That feels good.
Yeah, it's gonna feel good too when people get their hands on this. So we are looking forward to June for some of this stuff, and into the not so distant future after that for some more. And I cannot wait to the next time that we do visual target stream in May of next year or later on this year when we decide to do this again, and we can sit down and see where you guys are at, where you're going, and look back on where we come from, because it has already been a pretty significant change just from where we started a couple months ago. So I am looking forward to it. So, CCP Maximum Cats, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure, as always,
thank you,
to have you. I will toss it back over to CCP Jötunn to wrap us up here. Until then, I've been CCP Jötunn, joined by Maximum Cats. Take it away, CCP Jötunn. Thank you, CCP Jötunn. Once again, this is me, of course, CCP Jötunn, back with, of course, CCP Cat. Thank you all so much for joining us and watching this stream. I thought this thing was nuts, and I'm glad we were able to share it with you guys. There's so much cool stuff in there, and truly so much other cool stuff. Yes, look at this cat. Very good. Anyway, a lot of cool stuff in there. A lot of cool stuff still coming. So next week, obviously this weekend, a lot of our team is on holiday, so you probably won't hear too much from me for the next couple days, which is, I'm sure, for a lot of you, a relief. But we are going to be back in action next week. Next Friday, we'll have another stream. We're going to be bringing on CCP Hex, CCP Layout Lord, and CCP... I can't remember their name. 3 of our UI and UX designers to talk about the UI and UX of Frontier. And they have a lot of cool stuff to talk about, a lot of cool stuff to show. And you've never spoken to them before, which is super cool. So... cat, please. I'm so sorry. There you go. But anyway, until then, friends, remember, we are still going through our Remnant Access period until Monday. Remnant Access is a free access period. You can go to efrontier.com/trial if you... Okay, and the cat is done. Sorry about that. efrontier.com/trial if you want to participate in the game for the next couple days. We will be wrapping that up again on Monday. And we are also doing a sale right now on Founder Access Packs. If you like what you see and you want to be more involved in the development process, want to be able to get access to some cool dev content, be able to literally ping anybody on the team at like 2 in the morning. Please don't do that, but people do it anyway. You can do that. You can sign up for those Founder Access Packs. Those are all $10 off right now, and we'll be, I believe, through the end of Remnant Access. So it'd be a good time to do it. If you're interested in doing it, go check it out. Other than that, we are still, of course, running our the social media contest and our Discord. If you are a Remnant writer or one of our founders, you can participate in that contest. We'll be giving away some of the cool tribal packs with some cool cosmetics in them. You saw a couple of those already in the stream. We'll be giving 10 of those away, and one lucky person who is my favorite is going to get all 3. Should be a cool thing to win, if that's your thing. So, until next time, my friends, thank you so much, of course, as always, for joining us. I hope you are all having a good time. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. We will be back, like I said, next week. But until then, we'll see you out on the frontier. I've been CCP Jötunn. Have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.